is North Korea ramping up the rhetoric. The Kim Jong-un regime's UN ambassador made a heated speech before the General Assembly yesterday, saying, quote, unless the hostile policy and the nuclear threat of the U.S. is thoroughly eradicated, we will never put our nuclear weapons and ballistic rockets on the negotiation table under any circumstances. Also written in the ambassador's prepared remarks, but ultimately not said, the threat that nuclear war may break out any moment. Joining us right now is Fox News military analyst General Jack Keane. And General, it's always a pleasure and an honor to see you.
Good to be here,
Thanks
Maria.
so much for joining us. Your thoughts on this latest provocation?
Well, I think it's part of the theme that certainly the North Koreans are exercising. You know, we're in the 10th month of President Trump doing something that his predecessors really did not do, and that seriously put a military option back on the table. And you know, when you look at this, Maria, big power competition is fundamentally a test of wills. We saw that with Roosevelt and Truman in World War II, John Kennedy during the Cuban Missile Crisis, you know, with Nikita Khrushchev, and also we saw it with Reagan and the Soviet Union. And we have it here. And certainly this is definitely a crisis. I don't think for a minute that North Korea, despite those words that they're using, would initiate a nuclear attack on the United States at this time. That would result in the destruction of the regime. But they're clearly using rhetoric to try to get the United States to stand down, to back away from what it's doing. And they've got to be having some concerns about what is our true main effort. The military options on the table. The president uses a lot of rhetoric to convince the North Korean regime that we're dead serious about it. And certainly he's entitled to do that. I would probably use different words in describing that at times, but nonetheless, that's what he's doing. That's the intent of his words. The other thing is the main effort is the diplomatic economic sanctions that China is cooperating with. We'll see what comes out of the 19th Party Congress that starts tomorrow. And if China is going to follow through and be as tough in execution as they're telling President Trump personally that they're going to be, and if that's the case, if they really get tough with North Korea, I do think we'll see some positive results.
So at this point, the U.S. should just stand down, not do anything different? I mean, Mike Pence says that the U.S. is ready, but at this point, there's nothing to do until we see more revelations out of
Well, I think the exercises that we're conducting are something that needs to be done. We need to practice with South Korea. After all, if we have to go to war, we need to be ready. And you can't just do that in a computer exercise. You've got to get out there and practice some of these complicated skills that we have. So that is meaningful, what's taking place. That's also sending a message to North Korea. It's also sending a message to China that we're out there right off the coast doing this kind of naval exercises. But in terms of the rhetoric, I think that it's fine where we are. Just leave it alone. Keep the rhetoric down as low as we possibly can be. And let's work through China as we're currently doing.
Let me ask you about this, because Arizona Senator John McCain last night received the very prestigious Liberty Medal from the National Constitution Center. During the ceremony, he made a fiery speech and he condemned isolationism. I want to ask you what you think he meant by this. Listen to this.
To fear the world we have organized and led the 3/4 of a century, to abandon the ideals we have advanced around the globe, to refuse the obligations of international leadership and our duty to remain the last best hope of Earth for the sake of some half-baked, spurious nationalism cooked up by people who would rather find scapegoats than solve problems, is as unpatriotic as an attachment to any other tired dogma of the past that Americans consigned to the ash heap of history.
Wow. Half-baked, spurious nationalism.
Well, John McCain are friends, full disclosure here. You know, I talked to him quite a bit, and he's certainly challenged by what he's doing. He's a man of unbelievable moral and physical courage. All that said, if the intent is he's criticizing the president, listen, they disagree completely in terms of style and what the president chooses to talk about. But what the president does in terms of policy, there is considerable agreement, because standing up to North Korea, killing the Obama policy of strategic patience and doing nothing, going to the Middle East and confronting the Iranians and standing with our allies. I don't see us pushing U.S. national interests at the expense of our allies. And what he did, what the president did in Poland, when he went into Poland and stood for the international order and said it's based on our collective values that we share, it's based on human dignity, it's based on our faith in God, that was quite an extraordinary speech. And when you think about even the North Korean issue, what is the framework that we're using to sanction North Korea? The framework is the United Nations. It's the UN Security Council, 15 votes. So this president is smack in the middle of the international order, trying to uphold it. The rhetoric in the campaign would lead you to believe something else. But I don't see him walking away from American leadership being exercised on a global stage, promoting stability and security. That is what they're doing, and John McCain is in sync with that.
So putting the rhetoric aside, the way they have different styles, and they obviously do, you think John McCain agrees with what the president has been doing in terms of foreign policy?
I think he gives him, generally speaking, some pretty good marks. He doesn't agree with everything. I mean, certainly he thinks that we're surrendering eastern Syria to the Iranians and we should be standing up. It's not just about ISIS. It's what's going on in Syria. He believes the Pentagon owes him a military strategy and what we're going to execute in Afghanistan. But the president's made the decision. He wants the Pentagon to tell him, how we're going to do it. He doesn't totally agree. But in principle, the fact that we have abandoned the policies of Barack Obama's last 8 years of disengagement, and the American foreign policy and national security is back on the world stage, he agrees with that.
You make a good point, because Iran is having this huge land grab. I mean, they're in Syria, they're in Yemen. No wonder the president decertified the deal. They're just getting bigger and bigger and more dangerous, and then he says they're not compliant.